just spend a few moments just arriving onto your seats, onto your cushions. And my reason for quite often beginning in this way is because we've all been moving around quite a bit. We've been getting ourselves set. We've had a little bit of a chit-chat before beginning. Some of you have been at work. And of course, it's been about a week since we've last met, so lots has happened. And so it's nice to just spend a few moments just arriving. In fact, why don't we see this whole hour that we have together as an exercise in arriving? What do I mean? Let's begin by dividing ourselves into 3 different parts, which is really what forms the essence of this practice, a recognition that there are 3 parts to us. Now, the one part we've already started to acknowledge, that is that part that we call our bodies. Wriggle your fingers, wriggle your toes. Feel the clothing on your body. And it's nice if you're more than welcome to keep your eyes open, but when you close your eyes, there'll be less distractions. And you can use your sense of touch that not only covers the tips of your fingers, but envelops your whole body. And so when you discover this, the first part of ourselves, our body, you experience it, especially when your eyes are closed, you experience it through the contact between skin and clothing or fabric. The interaction between skin and the air around you. Some of you might have fans on, or you might have the window open. You might feel a gentle breeze brushing against your skin, and sometimes you might just feel stillness. But even when you feel stillness upon your skin, you can still contrast it against those parts of the body which are covered in clothing. And so the exposed areas feel a little bit cooler, can you notice? Whereas those parts that are covered in fabric, not only do you feel the fabric, but you feel the very thin layer of warm air trapped underneath the fabric, between fabric and skin. Gives you a slightly warmer sensation and experience of this present moment. And then you feel the softness of your fabric. No matter how rough the fabric is, you'll still notice how soft it is because of its ability to fold, its ability to bend around the elbows or your shoulders. Are you getting a feel for your body? We'll come back to the body because the body is going to be a very important tool in our practice, because as you can notice, The body is present in this moment called the now. Here. So we know that the body has arrived at this practice. No matter how much it's been moving earlier on today, right now it's come to a state of relative stillness. There's still movement. You can feel your chest rising and falling. You can feel your stomach rising and falling as you breathe. A little bit of twitching here and there, but on the whole, compared to those other moments in our day, relatively still. And now the second part. And the second part, we'll call that the mind. Now the mind, more likely than not, it hasn't quite arrived. Although you do find glimpses of alignment. There are points, especially when you were exploring the surfaces around your body. Your mind was helping you because it's the mind that identifies fabric, skin, stomach, chest. And so during those moments, you would have found quite a lot of stillness and peace because the mind, it left its problems, it left its stories, it left all of that which we carry around within our mind, within that concept called time. And it joined us here in the present moment, but maybe not so consistently. So it jumps back into the conversations, maybe those things you have to do, and then occasionally popping in to see what's going on in this present moment. And that's good. Because in this practice, we're going to see if we can develop a new relationship with our mind. And what do I mean by new relationship? Acknowledging, noticing that it is a separate entity. It is stepping back, releasing the identification that we have up until this point had with our mind. If this practice is quite new to you, you might wonder, what is he talking about? Identification with the mind? Bring back any of those moments when you felt frustration, anxiety, fear, stress. Those are really good examples of us being completely identified with the mind. And because we've switched off our televisions, we've switched off the radios and the podcasts and the internet browsing, and we've asked those people in our lives to give us a little bit of privacy, what we have in fact done is remove many of the distractions we normally have that stimulates and occupies the mind. And maybe for the first time, in fact, let's make it let's turn this into the first time. Let's see this as the first practice. No matter how seasoned you are a practitioner, we invoke a quality called the beginner's mind, where we release all previous practices. Everything that we know about meditation. And we enter into this moment like a child with innocence, not quite sure what you're going to find. And then simply begin the process of observing the mind. Which brings us to the third part. Remember at the beginning of this practice, I said at the basis of this practice, there's an acknowledgement that there's a recognition that there are three parts to us: body, mind, and the witness, the observer. In mindfulness, in meditation circles, some teachers refer to it as consciousness, as awareness, as that part of you that doesn't change. What do I mean? Can there be a part of us that doesn't change? How do you notice your body changing? Which part of you noticed how your body grew from a child? You were aware, there was awareness when you were a child, when you were a teenager, when you were an adult. You watched the body change and you continue to watch the body change. That part which observes the change, there must be one part that is not changing in order to recognize and notice these changes. And it is this part that we will tap into during today's practice. Even the mind, constantly changing. You might have noticed how your beliefs have changed over the years. Many of the beliefs are, because the changes are very often so subtle, it's a little easier to notice the more our interests. How when we were kids we played with toys. How as we grew up we threw away some of those toys and our interests changed. And as adults, the focus kept changing. Work, promotions, awards, relationships. The priority constantly changing. Yet there was one part that didn't change. That part that right now at this moment is witnessing the body, feeling all of the sensations within and around the body. That part which is watching the mind return back into the past, and then project itself into the future. This becomes the perfect moment to remind ourselves that in this practice, we're not here to stop this thought process. And depending on how you define meditation, a lot of people, myself included, many years ago, I used to say I couldn't meditate because of the, and as the years passed, I began to realize it was simply because of the way in which I defined meditation. I believed that meditation meant having a mind that was completely still, with no thought. But then I began listening and reading the words of teachers who described the mind. And according to them, it was the nature of the mind to think, to move, almost as though it had a life of its own. And you've seen that because very often we start off with a completely harmless thought, or we see something in front of us that is completely harmless, and then that thought leads to another and to another, and pretty soon we're in the middle of a story somewhere from the past, or something we've concocted about the future. And in today's practice, we release all of these labels: meditation, mindfulness, and simply call it sitting and breathing. How easy is that? I'm here to sit. And I think most of us, we've already derived the simple fact that we are sitting here. And breathing, we've been breathing since the day we were born. But maybe right now we're just a little bit more conscious and aware of this simple fact that we are breathing. And because the air is invisible, we're going to focus more on the sensations that point towards this fact that we are breathing. And because these sensations are unraveling around and within our body, by around the body, I mean can you feel the breath as it enters and leaves through the nostrils? Brushes against your upper lip, brushes through the rims of your nostrils, your chest wall, it rises as you breathe in. Your stomach wall, that too rises as you breathe in. And then as you exhale, the chest falls, the stomach falls, as in the stomach wall. And then you feel the slightly warmer, more humid air brushing against the upper lip and the rims. And these little sensations, they may not seem to be that big a deal, but because these sensations are unraveling at this present moment, and because we are experiencing them through our bodies, the mind, it begins to align itself with the body. And you are arriving more fully, more completely into the present moment, where it becomes a little bit easier to watch the mind, because if you were to cast your gaze upon the mind right now, you will notice that its thoughts, whatever it's thinking, is very inconsistent with the present moment. Because in your present moment, you're sitting here, or some of you might be lying down, of course, but you're sitting and breathing. While the mind, it exists within that concept called time. You're going to give your mind permission to think. And when you allow your mind, when you allow your thoughts, it's almost as though it's like giving a child a toy to play with. You're giving it permission, so you no longer need to entertain it. Space begins to appear. Gaps begin to appear around the thoughts. And pretty soon the thoughts, they begin to appear like soap bubbles. Because a few moments ago, identification with a thought is a little bit like being inside that bubble. Inside that soap bubble where the whole world looks completely distorted. There are reflections of light, but there's a very strong smell of soap, no doubt. But everything's very distorted. Anxieties, worries, stress, stories, anger, sadness. But you know that. That's what identification with the mind is. But what's your doorway out of this bubble? Your breath. Bring your attention to your breath. Because your breath is being sensed and experienced through your body, which is here in this present moment. And so you feel the air flowing in. Now take it a little bit wider, broaden your experience from just those external parts of the body to the inner parts of your nasal passage. Feel the breath as it makes its way up your nasal passage. And it even begins by simply noticing which nasal passage you are utilizing to breathe at this moment. Is it your right or your left nasal passage? And as you watch your breath, over time, over practice, you will begin to notice that it switches from one nasal passage to the next, usually in cycles of 30 minutes to 45 minutes. But right now, for me, I'm using my left. Let your nasal passage represent a bridge. A bridge between this world outside and around you. and the world, the space within you, called the present moment. So with every breath out, you experience the sounds, the sensations, the smells and the tastes, and what little sight you have as the light enters through your eyelids. And when you breathe in, follow the breath as it moves down the windpipe, even detecting that part where the bend occurs between the nasal passage, where it curves and it makes its way downwards, down the windpipe, through the lungs, down into the stomach. And if you'd like to take it a little bit further, around the chest, where the heart is, where some of you who are quite sensitive might even detect that little bump, that little beat, as it pumps the oxygen that has been extracted from this air into all of the regions around the body, so that you now begin to feel your whole body awakening. Once again, all of the surfaces. Your body, which is here, present in this moment called the now. You might find yourself anchored a little bit more into the present moment as you more consistently experience this process called breathing. And it becomes a little bit easier to notice the movements within the mind. How it exists in the past, in the future. And even if you're unsure whether or not you're in the present moment, sometimes the perfect test is to just notice, is there anything about the present moment that I am complaining about? Is there anything at all about the present moment that I do not like, whether it's a physical sensation, whether it's something I am listening to that I can hear? Because if there is something that you're complaining about, that's usually a very strong indication that you're not in the present moment. It gives you a glimpse into how the mind works, because it simply means that you have remembered some moment in the past which is different from the present moment, or maybe it's some moment in the future that you hope for or you fear. And it's comparing this present moment to that. And so it's pushing against something in the present moment. And you can use this to overcome physical discomfort or pain. Of course, I'm not asking you to be unreasonable. If your knee joint is hurting, if your posture is making you feel very stiff, then by all means change your posture, lie down if that helps at all. But I'm referring more to those conditions, those chronic pains or illnesses some of us sometimes carry within our bodies. So let's just say that one of us or more of us has a physical discomfort. Notice, first of all, how the mind, it remembers some moment in the past where there was the absence of this sensation. And it wants to rewind, it wants to go back into the past. And I think Buddhists, they use the word attachment, identification. And very often it's used to represent a strong identification with objects like our homes, our cars, our favorite pieces of clothing, the people, relationships, where we identify ourselves through that external object. And sometimes you can be attached to time, to a particular point in the past, identified with that particular point in time, and therefore, when this present moment, which has changed, is different from that moment, we resist. And that's where pain enters into the picture, discomfort. Notice these words, pain, discomfort. They have to do with us judging a particular sensation. When I ring the bell, let's change, or rather not change, but release these judgments and simply call them sensations. And this is actually what the present moment is like. Because if you were to exist, if I was to exist completely in this present moment, I would have nothing to define this sensation as. Because the mind, it's only through the mind that we learned what pleasant, comfortable sensations are, what uncomfortable sensations are, what normal should be and what abnormal is. So notice how we have accidentally stumbled and identified ourselves with the mind. But as we enter into the present moment, and you can use your breath again, bring your attention back to your breath, back to the sensations of every breath as it enters and as it leaves your body. You enter into a space where you no longer have the ability to compare this sensation against anything, because there is no past, there is no future. And I know that may seem quite unrealistic to most of us. And so we'll all begin with baby steps by simply feeling the sensation, just seeing it for what it is, a sensation. Noticing which part of the body it might be in. Talking to it, giving it permission to exist. no longer fighting against it, almost as though it was being assimilated into your body as a normal part of your body, a normal part of your day. And very often the changes may not be dramatic or drastic, but very subtle. You may notice very subtle changes in this relationship between yourself and the sensation. And the first thing you'll notice is that definition, that label falling away. So it's no longer a pain, it's no longer uncomfortable, it's no longer discomfort, it's just a sensation that is a part of your body. Less of a struggle, more ease, making peace with the present moment. But I think it's quite obvious that many of our minds, we have quite active minds that come up with very good questions. And one of the questions the mind usually would ask is, does this mean I'm going to live with this new sensation? Because I'm not going to be in this meditative state all the time. And when I'm in bed at 2 a.m., it's going to feel very uncomfortable. First of all, bring yourself back to the present moment. And then, I know most of you don't really have these little pockets of pain in your body, but just scan through your body, and even if you don't have a physical discomfort, let's call it that, are there any parts of the body that feel a little bit tight or tense? And that happens to the best of us. Sometimes it's the shoulders. For many of us, it's around the forehead. For many of us, it's the stomach. And if you've ever had butterflies in the stomach or felt that nervous tingle within, deep within, it's usually in the stomach. And of course, if you do have a chronic pain that's been here for quite some time, let these sound waves from the bell, let them direct them towards these different parts of the body which are either experiencing this tightness, this tension, invite these sound waves to move through, initially just the skin. And so you feel the skin loosening. And underneath the skin, the layer of muscle, releasing an intention that the muscles around the region loosen and relax themselves. And then perhaps underneath the muscle, there may be organs, there may be nerves, there may be bone, there might be anything really. Let these sound waves move through them. Allowing, inviting these sound waves to move through them. Not even attempting to hold on to these sound waves, but allowing that particular body part to become transparent to these sound waves. so that these sound waves simply move through, each bell loosening knots so that the knots become undone. So that you feel at peace with the sensation, with the sounds around you. And then we enter into that part of this practice which relates to the well-being and health of the body, simply because when the mind asks, do I have to live with this condition for the rest of my life? Does this mean this accepting and allowing this sensation to mean that it's going to stay with me forever? No, it simply means making peace with the present moment. It simply means you're letting go of the struggle, the pushing against, the tightness, the tension. And when that happens, you're simply giving control of the body back to the immune system. So the body begins to repair itself from within. And if you've ever wondered, I know how the mind is. It's always asking questions. I mean, how can this be? Does my body have the ability, the capability to repair itself from within? Most of us, we've had scrapes, we've had cuts, particularly as kids. And we saw how quickly the blood would freeze, the bleeding would stop. That's an indication of that intelligence within our body we refer to as the immune system. Always balancing, always releasing the perfect chemicals. And so as we release and as we let go, as we make peace with the present moment, not only do we allow the present moment, but we allow our immune systems to awaken, to balance, to heal, to repair, whatever words you want to use. And as you enter into the present moment more completely, you'll find yourself leaving many of the stories that have been concocted within the mind, of finances, of status, of arguments, of relationships, of the past and the future. Remember, the only relevant part that we are interested in at this particular moment is the present moment. And in this present moment, as you can notice, there is more right with it than wrong. Because we are seated together with like-minded beings with relative privacy, with bodies that are fairly well fed, fairly comfortable, with access to this technology, these devices, this space around us, the present moment, everything else a part of the story, that separate entity called the mind. And that's all this practice is about, aligning the mind, the body, and this witnessing presence, awareness, consciousness. And that's why we often start with the body and its sensations in this present moment, because we know that the body is here in this present moment. Where awareness is, where presence is. And we gradually begin to notice our identification shifting from the mind that continues to think, to move, shifting into this present moment. And now I'm going to ring the bell so that we can all have a nice stretch. We can have a sip of water. We can perhaps even change our postures if that's something your body is asking for. But before you move, if you haven't already moved, see if you can bring a sense of continuity to the practice, because I'm sure you've all tried a form of meditation called movement meditation. And movement meditation can be a beautiful thing, especially because most of us spend most of our days moving. Whether we're doing our work, our chores, traveling, running, exercising. So try to bring a sense of continuity to your practice by noticing the tendency that when my words suggested movement, notice how you would have found a particular part of the body that you were going to move. You might be perhaps giving a soft massage to a particular part, or you might have stretched your arms out or moved your back around in a twist. And notice the judgment that the mind awards to these movements as one movement, or the outstretched arms being of prime importance, of focus, that being the end that we would like to achieve. But when we turn it into a meditation, we release these judgments and we see every movement as important as the next. Beginning with the impatience that is brewing right now as you listen to my words. When is the bell going to ring? I can't wait to move. So watch that tendency. And when you hear the bell, track every movement. The beauty in the coordination. As different muscles move, as some contract, as some expand, and how joints like rubber bands, they begin to stretch in particular directions. Trying as best as you can to release judgments and appreciating and enjoying every movement that unfolds. And even if you choose to stay still because of how comfortable you are, just basking in that and being more present within your bodies. The weight of your arms, the weight of your body. Finding those limits. Noticing sometimes the tendency to move beyond limits. And when you return back into whatever posture it is that you're choosing to adopt for the final few minutes of this practice. Any sense of relief, any difference in the state of the mind, in the state of the emotions. And when I refer to emotions, it's the body's way of experiencing the world around us through this filter called the mind. And in this part of the practice, we'll remind ourselves how we can continue to use the mind as a tool. Up until now, most of us have started to acknowledge how the mind uses us, how the mind thinks for us because of that identification. But now we will direct the mind and bring into your mind's eye the image of a tree. And it's got, let it be an old and a large tree. And by old, I simply mean one with roots that dig deep into the crust of the earth. Because we're looking for a tree that has stability, just like us. You see, because we've been here for a very long time. At least the witnessing presence has. And just like the tree, merging into this image, where it's your arms, they become branches of this great tree. Your head, your nose, your ears, and then your trunk, the trunk of your body, merging into the trunk of this great tree. And lower your center of gravity from your navel area into the earth underneath you, into the flooring, into the ground underneath you. And then bring yourself back to your breath. Using your breath to center yourself and anchor yourself a bit more strongly and deeper into the present moment. By visualizing the breath entering in through your nostrils and moving all the way down through your roots, stabilizing, your shoulders, just like the sides of this tree and the low-hanging branches. Notice how the tree, it watches, it observes. It observes in the short term, it watches how the different people they walked past, they walk underneath its branches. Some of them smiling, some of them playing, some of them laughing, and others in a hurry, worried, some even quarreling. But notice how this tree, it simply observes without interfering. You could even give your tree a very kind and smiling face, a knowing face that observes, that witnesses. And then notice how, just like the tree, our bodies have a whole ecosystem of life. The same way the tree has leaves and on its branches, squirrels and nests with birds, both young and old. Our bodies, with trillions and trillions of cells, with rivers of blood, not so different from the chlorophyll that moves through the leaves. And in the longer term, where the days turn into nights and the night into days and then changing seasons, those of us in the northern hemisphere in summer, which will soon shift into autumn, where the leaves will begin to fall off, and then into a stark and somewhat contrasting winter, followed by a spring. Absorb the qualities of the tree in its ability to allow, to witness, to observe, to not fight against change. How it simply releases its leaves in autumn. How it releases the fruits and the blooms and the flowers. Not attempting to speed up the process whereby blooms turn into flowers, buds turn into flowers, or buds into fruits. Simply observing, allowing, knowing the perfection in the present moment. Not even wondering when the next rainfall will arrive. Completely content in the present moment. At peace. And as I ring the bell, let the storms pass. And these may be represented by the storms that you may be carrying within your mind, those stories, whether of finance, of health, of relationships, but feel the flexibility within your branches as you dance to the rhythm of the wind, swaying, releasing, allowing. And then notice those rigid beliefs that resist change. That which we referred to earlier on in this practice as attachments to particular points in our life, whether past or sometimes projections into the future, wanting to be somewhere other than where we are. Unflexible. Let those be represented by those branches within the tree that are rigid, dry, unable to bend and dance and sway. And with the ringing of this bell, let cracks appear, and let the wind take these branches away, so that you feel lighter, so that I feel lighter. And just as we began this practice with the beginner's mind, as young children, flexible limbs, dancing and swaying and allowing of this present moment in its entirety. And with this bell, let it represent the closing of our practice, but the beginning of the true practice. Where we bring this presence, this awareness, which many teachers refer to as the space of kindness, of understanding, of infinite patience with us as the day unfolds from moment to moment. Thank you all for joining me in today's practice.